We've talked a lot on the show about some of the worst hiring practices. Let's talk about a specific one today that I think is not just a bad hiring practice, it is a terrible reflection on you as a business owner if you do this one thing. Hey, my name's Blake Benz. I'm the host of the Good Advice Podcast. We talk about the actionable, practical things that actually work in your business to grow your brand. Not that fluffy theoretical stuff, literally just the tried and true things that work in business. And if you're a first-time listener to the podcast, welcome to our show today. I'm excited to dive in today about something that you may be doing without even realizing it because you think, is this how I'm supposed to do it? We're going to dive into more of this conversation on hiring, but before we do, we have an incredible business that is sponsoring today's podcast episode. Check out this quick ad, and don't forget, if you love the podcast and you're willing to support the podcast, you can always go to our Patreon for as little as $5 a month. You can support the podcast at patreon.com/goodadvice. And of course, I so appreciate those of you who support the podcast long term. All that to say, let's check out this quick ad, and we'll be right back soon. There's one single piece of advice that I give to business owners who are ready to scale their business drastically. And that's knowing exactly what you need to hand off so that you can continue focusing on what you're an expert in. It amazes me when I talk to business owners who are doing their own bookkeeping and tax prep, and worse, that they're going through all this paperwork at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, even midnight, slaving away trying to make sense of all of the numbers for their business. Business owners who are making it happen have already figured out that you can't do it all yourself. That's why I recommend Steve Lay with Equity Business Solutions. Not only is he an expert in bookkeeping and tax prep, but what I love about Steve is that he'll sit down with you and help you make sense of the value of your business beyond just reading a spreadsheet. You'll be able to make better decisions, and more importantly, you're going to save yourself the crucial time you would have spent going through QuickBooks or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is that keeps us up late at night. So save yourself some time and some money by giving Steve Lay a call at Equity Business Solutions, and he'll show you the value beyond your numbers. Go to equitybusinesssolutionsllc.com to find out more. Okay, occasionally we like to talk on the podcast about hiring strategies that are pretty toxic, and not just toxic, but silly or stupid when it comes to actually figuring out is someone a good fit for your business or not. Now, what I will say is that there's nothing wrong with running a business where you never hire someone. There's plenty of businesses out there that are healthy, strong businesses. I've worked with businesses in the past. I've had customers in the past where their revenue is around 200, 300K, and they are certainly very happy with that revenue number, and they have no interest in actually scaling or growing the business, and thus are not intending to ever hire someone. So getting it out right from the get-go, you definitely don't have to hire anyone ever for your business. However, if you're running a business and you are looking at delegating out some of the things that you really don't enjoy about your business, maybe you're not looking at scaling like crazy, but you do want to bring on maybe your first team member, or maybe you're running a small business and you're, managing a handful of people. Inevitably, you're going to interview someone and you're going to have to figure out, is this person a good fit for my business or not? Now, in previous podcast episodes, we've talked at length as to some of the worst things you can do in these interview conversations. A couple of my favorite worst things you can do. Two of them that stand out. One of them is the dish trick, where you offer someone a cup of coffee, and when the interview's over, if they don't offer to go wash that cup out, they're a bad fit for the business. They're not willing to get their hands dirty. It's a very stupid trick. Plenty of applicants won't even think about, they'll just treat the coffee cup as a hospitable thing and wouldn't even insist on taking the cup back. But that's one of them. The other one that is certainly more unhinged is this one called the laundry trick, where you take the applicant into the interview room and you dump a pile of laundry. The pile of laundry is already on the desk. You say, I'll be right back in a few minutes. I got to answer a call or whatever. And while you're gone, if the applicant doesn't fold the laundry, they're a bad hire. They're not a team player. And The reason this is so unhinged is, I mean, why would you, if I'm an applicant, I'm thinking, why the heck is this person's clothes in here? And it's just incredibly weird, and I feel like it would do more damage than good if your potential hires saw that this is how you're running your business. So there's no shortage of really silly, strange hiring practices out there. I think this is not unlike many other things that are true, not just in life, but also in business. In fact, our most recent episode, we talked about silver bullets and shiny objects. And what I've come to find is that rather than embracing something that is hard, people will often look for the quickest route to solve a problem. This is just human nature, by the way. There was an old, oh, I'm going to butcher it. There was an old quote by and the reason I'm going to say I'm going to butcher it is because I can't even remember who said it or how they said it. But the vague memory I have was that there was like a famous video game developer who basically said that no matter how cool or intriguing you make a video game, people playing the game will always look for the shortest path of rewards. People in general will always look for the quickest path to that next dopamine hit. It's one of the reasons why social media like TikTok does so well is that it literally triggers your dopamine again and again and again, just as you scroll through that platform. So this is nothing new about people, but rather than embracing something difficult, we often look for what's the hack, what's the secret, what's the shortest path, how do I get by this, how do I not have to do the thing. It is for people who want to get healthier. What's the drug that I can take? What's something that I can just, inject or eat or do that makes it so that I don't have to do those things? It's true for sales. It's this sales. There was a popular wasn't actually popular at all, but there's a version of this that gets shared from time to time that talks about how sales is easy. Just send this one line email to increase your results by 189%, or just say this one thing, or here's the one line to deal with every objection, or just send this email with this exact script. And what you have to know is that those things don't work for every situation because people are complicated. And in the same way, hiring people is difficult. You're sitting down with someone who will sometimes tell you what you want to hear. They'll sometimes outright lie about their experience or on what they can do for you. And this is definitely a two-way street when it comes to hiring, in that you, as the interviewer, you, as the person deciding if this person's a good fit, it is largely reliant on your skill set to be able to ascertain and figure out, is this person going to be good for my business or not? We're not all good at that. It is a skill that you have to develop and get better at. I feel like I'm pretty good at interviewing today, but I think back to the time when I was a school teacher and we were interviewing someone who was applying for a job. I don't know why I was involved in this hiring process, but I was one of the people on the part of the interview committee, the hiring committee, excuse me. And this person could not have been a worse fit for the school in the sense of they just had no experience. Didn't really have, I don't remember why, but I voted to hire this person because I thought, you know what, let's give him a shot. Came to find out down the road, this person was not a great hire or didn't seem like a great hire. And it seems like those who were a little bit more experienced in the hiring world, that maybe I should have deferred to their expertise rather than me as a mid-20s guy that I actually knew better and actually knew what I was talking about. I didn't. So as of today, I feel like I'm a lot better at hiring. I've been in a lot of interviews. I've been trained at some of my previous work on being a better interviewer. And despite all of that, I would still say that hiring can be difficult. I would still say that despite feeling relatively comfortable with hiring, that I have made bad hires in that I didn't do a good job fully understanding what I needed for beyond just the title of the position, not fully understanding what I really needed versus what I thought I needed. and not always doing a great job of figuring out who exactly is the right person for the job. But in one particular instance, I was, uh, as I was, excuse me, I dropped something there. As I was trying to hire for a certain position in my business, I went to a friend of mine to get some advice because I was hiring someone in, I think this was like video editing or maybe this was social media. And I wanted to know in fact, this particular position that I was hiring for, I got something like 300 or 400 applicants for this position, which hiring in general, if you're applying for your job, if you're trying to get hired, I get it. I totally get it. There are so many people who apply for a role. It can feel desperate. That's not the focus of today's podcast episode, other than just to say I get it, and for those of you who are out there who are grinding away, keep applying, keep doing it. And one little tidbit I'll give you is make sure that whatever you're applying for, that your resume and you talk about that position. So of like the 400 applications that I got, I think this was for video editing or social media, maybe social media marketing or something. I got a number of those that wrote vlogger, lifestyle vlogger, people who applied who it was like, and this is made up because I can't remember the exact example, but it was like programmer or like coder or whatever. And I remember for a lot of these applicants looking at them thinking like, that's not even the position I'm hiring for. This was basically someone being like, I could do that. I have some tangentially related responsibilities, but when you have 400 people, you're literally just looking for the people who've done this job before. So a little advice for you if you're ever applying or you're trying to get hired for a job, make sure that you're talking about yourself and you're talking in your resume specifically about that exact job. Not only to mention the fact that a lot of these jobs get AI'd like crazy and that they run the applications through a software or through AI or whatever to throw out any of the applications that don't meet the job description of that specific job. Just be mindful of that, keep that in the back of your mind, and do a good job talking about what's in the job description in your application, so you can just get by that initial barrier when it comes to hiring. So, random tidbit. Anywho, in this specific position, though, I was wanting to know who could actually do the job. And so I wanted to see portfolios. I wanted to see work. I was requesting portfolios, and it was interesting too. This is less of a slight against people who are applying for jobs, but it is more understanding how sometimes the way you talk about your experience, how it gets perceived by people. The question I would ask would be, hey, send me your portfolio. And in fact, now that this is relevant, I'm actually hiring right now or about to hire. And I already had some people who've emailed me some work. And I did have someone who reached out. They said, hey, I saw you're hiring for a video producer. I'd like to introduce myself and here's my portfolio. And I admired this person emailing me because I thought this person gave me exactly what I would have wanted. This person knew I would want to see a portfolio. They sent it to me. It was easily accessible. I could see their work. And immediately I didn't have to have this long-winded back and forth. Because if that long-winded back and forth has to happen, I'm just not going to have it at all. I'm just not even going to talk to that person. But it was amazing asking people for portfolios, or they would say things like, "Oh, well, unfortunately, I'm in an NDA." What is it? What is this, by the way? Why do people say this? This is like some kind of interesting. I have to assume this is like a social media thing. I'm not totally sure where it came from, but this interesting reply that I've gotten a handful of times where when I ask for, can you send me your portfolio or send me some of your work? Cause I'm just curious, like what kind of work you do. And the people who say, oh, well, I'm under an NDA with some of my clients or my previous company, which I don't disbelieve that happens. I don't disbelieve that people sign NDAs. I've had to sign NDAs myself. I get it. It's not really a big deal. But it is really odd to me. The number, it's a little bit more common than I would expect it to be. And you can know as someone hiring, where I typically go to my head is they probably don't have any work, or they don't have any work they'd want to share. So again, if you're trying to get hired, you should really try to have some work on hand that you can show. And also just know that, if if you're in a position that you really can't show that kind of work, I would just say it's very difficult to take that conversation further in the hiring space just because there's not a lot you could tell me that's making me willing to have a future conversation if I don't even know the kind of work that you do from the get go. Um, so all that to say, I was trying to figure out who to hire for this position. And I think I called this in the intro of the podcast episode. I called this a toxic thing, something you really shouldn't do. But I said that a lot of us don't realize that we shouldn't do it. So I had this idea when I was hiring, and for my business, almost everything I do in business, I just learned myself. It's self-taught, for better or worse, right? There's been things that I've done that were not great that I've looked back in hindsight and thought, geez, that was bad. That was really bad. Even some things today where I look at something like I posted like a couple of weeks ago and I'm like, ooh, why did I that was not the best quality there. So I just try not to take myself too seriously and understand that this is a process for all of us. All that to say, in this particular instance, I was like, I don't want to know who. Oh, and I remember specifically what this role was. So I had a whole bunch of video content for the podcast, and what I wanted was I wanted to see what someone could do. The outcome that I wanted was for someone to take a podcast episode and turn it into a few social clips. And this was back in the day before Opus Clips or Opus AI, whatever it is, and a couple of these other AI tools that are really common, really prevalent. This was before COVID, or actually maybe I think this was around COVID, actually, maybe a little bit after. This was before the Chat GPT boom, where it became like such a major part of today's marketing conversation. And I wanted to see what someone's work would look like because I had all these podcast episode content, all these episodes that I wanted to turn into social media sound bites. Today's process, by the way, is so much different than it was back then. And this is before the days of podcastable and, having a video production element to the business, all that kind of stuff. Well, I knew I had all this content. I wanted to get it out there in a more meaningful way. So the idea I had was I was like, okay, I think for after I've had the interview, I'm going to give people I'm going to pick the people who I really like, and I'm going to give them a video project, or I'm going to give them a Google Drive. I'm going to say, hey, here's a few podcast episodes. Pick any one you want and show me a social media clip from it. Well, in doing this, I thought, well, I had this sort of sixth sense to it where I thought, should I pay these people to do this? Should I pay for this to happen? So I reached out to a friend of mine, Jackie Hermes, who's been on the podcast. She runs a seven-figure plus marketing agency, does a lot of incredible work with her business. And I said, hey, if you don't mind, I have a quick question. When you hire, do you pay people for this kind of stuff? Because I was like doing some Googling, I was reading some stuff about it. And I was reading like, yeah, it's very common to do this. It's very common to ask for a project or something like that. But again, there was something in the back of my head that was like, I think I need to dig into this a little bit more because I really want to do things the right way. And Jackie gave me some great advice. She said, you should really pay them. You should pay them because that appropriately respects their time and whatever values and ideals that your business that it operates by. What better way to communicate those values than with the people who actually work for you? So if you value people as a business, it's important that your employees understand that that is true. This is a whole nother conversation that we've had on the podcast a number of times where many businesses are great at marketing. They're great at talking about their customer service, their values, how much they care about the average person that buys from them. And then you come to find out after the fact that the people working there hate it there, that they're miserable, the company abuses them. And this is not a company that's actually built on a foundation of these things. This is a company that ultimately they're really great marketers. They're great at marketing and convincing people that, hey, we're a really great company, even though the people who work there, they know that that's not the case. So the advice that I got was, hey, this is a great way to show that you really practice what you preach. And I loved this. So what we basically did was I said, hey, Here's a Google Drive of videos. You don't need to watch any of them, or you don't even need to watch a whole video. But I'm gonna pay you $100, and you just need. I don't want you to do any more. I think I said don't do any more than an hour of work. Maybe I said 2 hours of work. And because I really didn't want them spending, I was worried about like the perfectionist spending like 12 hours on this. And I really didn't want that to happen. And more importantly, from like a functional side to it, with the volume of content I wanted created, I didn't want someone who was going to spend a long amount of time on a single social clip, because I knew that no matter how good a social clip was going to be, it was really going to be consistency of posting, consistency of content that would take the brand far rather than trying to create a viral clip. So I said something to, and I'm remembering this as I'm telling it, so the details may be a little fuzzy, but it was something like, "Hey, spend at most an hour or two on this. You can pick any one of the videos. You don't have to watch it in its. Just pick a section that you really like, and I want you to create a social media clip for me under 60 seconds. Don't use any external graphics. Just find the clip, cut it, put subtitles on it, and then send it back to me." And I gave them something like maybe 5 days or something like that to do it. So a couple hours to do this. Now, again, I said, "Hey, you're gonna be paid $100." And I'm pretty sure I also said like, "Hey, the clip's gonna be yours also. I'm not gonna use the clip. The clip is work that you've done. But certainly if you develop a great clip, I'll ask for your permission to be able to distribute it." So I did this, and I think I had maybe 7 or 8 people who I had out of all of the applicants. I did a much smaller pool of interviews, and of those pools of interviews, I gave them the task. Of the people I gave the task, some of them never responded again. I never heard from them again. And it could be that they thought, "Oh, it's not worth my time," or, I don't know. Or maybe they actually weren't able to do it. I don't know. Or, maybe they saw my talking head and thought, "There's no way I could have a job, listening to this guy." I don't know what it was. It wasn't a big deal, but some people just didn't do it at all. Some people waited to the very last day and asked for an extension, and I politely declined. And then there was a group of people who delivered on it, and they were paid their $100. And of the people who delivered on time, I had another interview with one of them, and then I hired someone. I hired someone from that great person, a person who I was really happy to have worked with, and is in the business world today. Continues to do a great job in the business world today. So here's what I'm getting at. Why did I go through this whole story about this? Now being 3 or 4 years removed from this, because I think this was, as I think about it, I think 2021, maybe. Now being 3 or 4 years removed from this, I have come to discover how deeply common it is. Like I see stories about this and I'm like, okay, what's going on with unpaid work? Seriously, what is happening with unpaid work today? There is a cultural problem in the business world today with people who are hiring and asking for projects. And it's not just like video work or like creative work. It's send me a pitch deck, send me a your marketing plan, send me whatever it is. And then what that business is doing is they are then politely declining that applicant, or maybe the applicant never hears anything back again. But then what they're doing is they're taking that work and they're using it for their own business. So the specific thing that I saw recently was a woman who was a marketing professional. And in the hiring process, she was asked to develop a marketing strategy and present it in a pitch deck. So she created it, delivered it to the company, did not hear back, or maybe she was declined. I can't remember. Well, came to find out that that company then executed that marketing strategy without her permission and without paying her. Let's put it simply. You are stealing other people's work. And let's not minimize that, and let's not be clever in how we talk about it. Just because you interviewed someone does not mean that they are gifting you work that you can then distribute or pass off underneath the name of your brand. This is a very slimy way to do business. And again, you may not know that this isn't a great practice. It's why I went to my friend Jackie Hermes and said, "Hey, I should pay people, right?" And she said, "Yes, you should pay people." So I'll give a pass in the sense of those of you who are younger in business, younger as in you're newer to business, who you may not have known, you may not have realized, but let's again be very clear. If someone needs to develop some kind of output in the hiring process for you, you should pay them for it and you should present that task. If you plan on using it or distributing it, that should be clear from the get go. It should be clear from the get go. It's wrong otherwise. And again, you're stealing from the person applying. Really, you're stealing. It's not cool. So now that we got my soapbox out of the way, here's the deal, y'all. Here's the deal. On one hand, I wanted to be really clear on that part of it for those who didn't know. On the second hand, this is a little bit of another conversation as we start to wrap up the conversation today. There are things that people do in business that are the norm that are not okay. There are things that people do in business that are the norm that are not okay. And I point this out because I think a lot of us, I think we misunderstand that just because it's common, that this is something we should be doing, that we should all be doing, and that we should be doing long term. And I'll give you an example of this. I had a guy, I think I was on a phone call or maybe it was an email, early days of good advice, somewhere around like year one, maybe year two. I got this message and this person said, "Hey, I run a business. I have a few employees. I think he had 3 or 4 employees." And he said, I'm ending the year. I have $20,000 extra. And my first thought was, I'm just going to give it to them. I'm just going to split it up between the 4 of them. But I'm not supposed to do that, am I? And he was talking to me. He goes, "I'm not supposed to do that, am I?" And I was like, "Well, why are you not supposed to do that?" And he goes, "Well, because you're not supposed to, right?" And I was like, "No, I mean, if it's your money, if you want to give it to your employees, you totally can. Absolutely. In fact, they're gonna really like working for you after that." But it's always stuck to me, this person's expression of, "I'm not supposed to do that, am I?" Because I've heard some form of this in a multitude of other areas where someone does something because they assume I'm not supposed to do that. And I'll give you another example. I'll give you 2 actually. One is in customer service conversations. Many of us know you're supposed to have a very professional, and this is like such a terrible example because some of you are gonna you're gonna ding me on this. But so hear me out for a second. You think with customer service, you're supposed to give a professional answer. Your call is important to us. Or, you see the email, "Thank you for choosing good advice." I just don't talk that way. That's not how I talk. I don't talk prim and proper. When I talk to someone, I say "man" a lot. So I'm talking to, "Yeah, man, we could do that." "Hey, bud. Hey, man, good to hear from you." I mean, I don't want to say bud to everybody. That's probably a little weird for some people. But "Yeah, man, sure thing, dude. Okay, man." That's just how I talk. It is. I don't think I've ever lost a customer from it, but I did definitely have this thought process of like, am I allowed to say "man"? Am I allowed to talk this way? And I fortunately got some great advice at some point that was just like, the more you are true to yourself, the better someone is going to trust you, and the better someone is going to relate with you, and the better someone is going to be willing to buy from you. So from a customer service standpoint, I was talking to a guy today. We made a mistake on his website and he said, "Well, why didn't this happen?" And I said, "Yeah," I said, directly, I said, "Because we made a mistake, man. I'm sorry." That was on us. We made a mistake. Here's how we're fixing it. It'll be fixed by the end of the day, and it won't be an issue again in the future. And he said, okay, sounds great. Wasn't an issue at all. But what I could have also done is given some weird business-esque response because I could have thought that's how you're supposed to do it. Instead, I talked like a normal human being and gave just a very clear answer, a direct, candid answer on here's what happened, here's how we fixed it. Same thing is true in sales. We have many of us who stick to a script. You have to say it this way. And here's the deal, man. Here I am already now jumping into that mode. But here's the deal. I think it's funny when I get into a conversation with people who are doing it by the book because you can always tell. They say things a very certain way. They say, let me just give you an example. They might say, is getting an additional 10 qualified leads a month important to you? Yeah, it usually would be. Okay, so since you told me that 10 qualified leads a month is important to you, what would you do if I could tell you that we could be the ones to increase those leads for you at no cost to you? Like the way they talk is an infomercial. And it's because they're reading a script or someone said you're supposed to say it this way. I just don't do business like that. I just don't do sales like that. And what I have found is the more I get away from how you're supposed to do it to instead being true to myself and how I actually talk and the conversations I actually have. Now, within reason, y'all, within reason. I'm not always, what's up, dude? How's it going, man? I'm not always talking. I mean, we could put a little professionalism on it, but I'm just saying, it's these things that it's like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I was allowed to do that. And I'll just tell you, yes, you are allowed to do that. You're allowed to pay your people more money. You are allowed to talk like a normal person. If someone is doing work for you in the hiring process, you are allowed to pay them. In fact, you should pay them. So I get it. A lot of us, we don't do things the right way because we just don't know. We just don't know. So this is me letting you know and cluing you in on it's okay. It's okay. And man, again, getting back to the hiring thing, you gotta pay people for the work they're going to do for you. And here's the deal, man, I've heard some crazy stories about this in the last few years. People who were, they did 1 or 2 week long projects, insane projects, like huge, vast strategies and plans or branding redesigns that take up an enormous amount of time. And then they submit it with the application and then they hear crickets, they hear nothing. And really that alone is already incredibly insulting, but to use the work afterwards, that's messed up. It's messed up. Again, you're stealing. It's not cool. Pay people for the work that they do for you. I wish I had a more less biting end of the podcast episode, but that's really it. I had seen on LinkedIn somebody who had applied for a marketing position. They had been asked to do a marketing strategy. The company stole it, as they put it. And that's what really got me fired up today was we got to talk about this. We got to get on the same page about this. So all that to say, take care of the people who are who are applying for you to work with you, the people that you're hiring. Pay people for the work that they do and be really clear about what the work's going to be used for. And also just being respectful, just being a respectful person. If the intention is you're going to develop this, we're going to pay for it, and then we might use it, you got to say that on the front end. Make it really clear. And I'm talking about small stuff, A social media clip is a small thing. If you're hiring a 200, 300K position and you ask someone for, a 12-month marketing strategy and it's incredibly intense and expansive, come on. You cannot, let's be real. We cannot abuse people in this way. Let's get real. Anyway, all right, that's today's episode. Thanks for tuning in today. If you enjoyed today's podcast episode, feel free to drop us a 5-star review and follow us and engage with us on the podcast. If you did not like the podcast, maybe don't do that. But all that to say, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. And that's today's good advice. See you later.